What's the creepiest thing you've seen or heard in real life? Happened to an old neighbor of mine. Two girls in the family, one 20 and in college, one 17 and a senior in high school. 20-year-old comes by with her boyfriend and finds the front door unlocked, which is weird but WTF. She goes to see if her sister is in her room, and that door's locked, and no answer when she knocks. She thinks her sister is just being a sulky teenager, so she and boyfriend pick the lock on the door. Her sister isn't there, but then she notices a man's feet sticking out from under the bed. She screams and runs away / calls 911. Boyfriend pretty heroically manages to talk the guy out from under the bed, then kept him in the room until the police arrive. The cops find a copy of the house key and a pair of the 17-year-old's underwear in the man's pocket, and as they take him out of the house, the dog doesn't start barking at him. This dog goes hysterical around people he doesn't know. The guy had been in the house before. Often enough the dog recognized him. Turned out he'd been regularly breaking in and stealing the girl's underwear. The next day a guy who lived nearby came over and asked them not to press charges. He said the man was his son. He was a brain-damaged veteran recently back from Iraq. Police did some investigating, and it turns out the guy was not his son and had never been a soldier. The 17-year-old was fine, thank God, but could never sleep in that room again. She slept in the room next to her parents for the next 6 months, until she moved away for college. I had a friend who lived in a house with the 3 friends in college. He's sleeping in his room, and it's in the middle of the night. He kind of wakes up and hears something, but just figures it's the wind or the cat, and goes back to sleep. A few minutes later he wakes up again, to hear someone softly whispering in a soft quiet voice, "Help me." He opens his eyes, and sees this lady with crazy eyes standing over him, with blood dripping out of her nose on him. Needless to say, he freaks out, jumps out of bed screaming, and runs out of the room, waking his roommates as he goes. Everyone wakes up, and they call the police, and eventually the story starts to become clear. The lady was tripping out on something bad. She knew she had to ask for help somewhere, but wasn't in a state of mind to know how to go about it. For whatever reason, the house wasn't locked that night, and so she was able to come in and try and ask for help. And here is the part that creeps me out the most. They followed the trail of blood which she was bleeding out of her nose back out of my friend's room, and find that it led into each of the other bedrooms, stopping at the bedsides. So all of the other roommates had this lady whispering "help me" while they were sleeping, without waking them up. Edit. Typo. On May of 1994-5 I went to see a couple members of the Allman Brothers play at Tega Theater in Athens, Georgia. Since it was cold outside, I had worn a flannel shirt, sweater, jeans, and boots, maybe even a jacket too, to the venue. The music was good, so I'd been dancing, and the theater was packed, so I was getting hot. I started to feel faint, and headed towards the door for fresh air. As I'm going up the stairs I catch eyes with a creepy redneck looking guy, but ignore it, and keep walking through the bar area. Unfortunately, I've waited too long to leave, and do faint. As I'm fainting I see 6 yellow shirts, with security written across them, coming towards me, and think, shit, I'm busted. They carry me out, sit me on a stool, and a fight with the scary redneck I saw earlier ensues in front of me. I turn to the bouncer and ask, why is security beating that guy up? The bouncer tell me, that guy was trying to take you home. He was trying to tell us you were his wife. I thought it a kidnapping. It still creeps me out to see the look of sheer terror on the girl's eyes as I was sprinting towards the car she had been tossed into. Not stereotypical creepy, but the look of terror can be quite terrible now that I've seen it in real life. Edit. For those curious, here's a link to my original post about the kidnapping. My mom has a good one. In this house she used to live in alone, she had an old school chain pull lamp in her bedroom. One night she says she went to bed, pulled the light off, and crawled into bed. Just as she was about to doze off she heard the distinct noise of the lamp chain being pulled, you all know it, and the lamp came on. She just got up, walked to the lamp, pulled it off again, and went back to bed. I asked her how she could possibly be so bold, and she just simply said that it's just like dogs, they can sense fear. One July morning in 1982, I was late for my job as a fry cook at a country club on Cape Cod. As I raced my Jeep over back roads in a rural part of town, I came around a tight bend in heavy morning fog. And there, standing in the middle of the road, was a man. Pale and sweaty. He was wearing only a pair of shorts and a backpack. I saw him only for a split second before I swerved and went off the road. But I'll never forget the face. He stared straight ahead, looking me right in the eyes with a wide-eyed, maniacal look on his face. His mouth was open, as if he was screaming, but there was no sound. I got out of the Jeep and ran back looking to take a swing at the guy, but he was gone. It wasn't until 10 years later that I saw him again on TV. His name is Haddon Clark, and he's a serial killer. He's the man I saw that morning in Woods Hole. I have zero doubt about it. You don't forget a face like that. It was a sunny summer day in Mysore, and I were wandering through a local community music and arts festival. There were a lot of people laying around in the grass and just generally hanging out. We were wandering past a guy who was lying on the ground, and I sort of just glanced down at him and noticed that his shirt was soaked in blood and there was a lot more blood pouring out from underneath it. You'd like to think that in these situations you act like a guy on a hit TV show and immediately spring into action, but for me at least that's not how it worked. It took me a good 5 to 10 seconds to fully realize that this guy at my feet was bleeding to death. As selfish as it sounds, my first instinct was not to rip my shirt off and apply pressure to his wounds. Rather, my first instinct was to figure out if whoever made this guy bleed was still around, and whether or not I was going to need to defend us from an attack. This took another 5 to 10 seconds. After assessing our surroundings, I didn't notice anyone standing around with a weapon, but several people were starting to gather. At this point, I figured I should probably try to do something for this guy, and that's when the medics ran up and took over. They rushed him to the hospital, and he died the next day. It turned out that he was out of his mind on some powerful hallucinogen and had stabbed himself 5 times in the chest. It was creepy to see someone bleeding to death, and I'm sometimes haunted by the question, if I hadn't wasted 10 to 20 seconds before trying to help this guy, would he be dead? Happened to my mom when I was 13 or so. We lived alone at that point and my older brother was at work. At about 11 PM she woke up to what she thought was the porch door opening, so she vaulted out of bed and ran downstairs and woke me up. Scared shitless, I grabbed my BB gun and slowly walked up to her room. Shaking uncontrollably, I opened the door. She had slammed it shut while running downstairs and flipped the light on. The porch door was indeed wide open, and there was a trail of wet stains in the stairs, and the line continued across the porch, through the porch door, and to the corner of a rug where there was a man's wet bathing suit crumpled on the floor. Weird thing is, we didn't have a pool, nor did any neighbors within any logical reason. We called the cops and filed a report, but nothing ever came of it. We got a family dog a few days later. When I was in college, I had a roommate who had been diagnosed schizophrenic. One night he dropped some acid, lit some candles, put on some Moody Blues, and sat down and tripped. When I got home later that night, he was in kind of a trance, and it took him a couple of minutes to realize that I was there. He told me that he'd had a very intense trip about forces of good and evil fighting over his soul. Then he realized that a couple of the long tapered candles he had lit were no longer burning. We walked over to them and saw that 2 of the candles had exploded about an inch from the base and had splattered wax all over the wall. We checked and wick inside the upper sections of the candles were unburned. I still don't know how to explain what caused them to explode. A mate of mine moved into a new house when his dad got a new job working at a prison counseling side. Typical 2-story house, older front porch, yada yada, not really important other than the 2 levels. He was in 2nd grade at the time and went to bed as usual. 2 brothers, mom, and dad home. He wakes up groggily when he feels something blowing across his face, cracks open his eyes, and there is a woman hovering standing over him at his bedside. His 2nd grade brain decided it's the babysitter and went back to bed. Wakes up again to banging drawers. The babysitter is now searching through his room. Back to bed. She must be looking for something important. Next thing he remembers, he woke up to the sight of his door wide open and his dad walking across with the babysitter in front of him. Ends up they moved into an ex-drug addict's house and the lady was strung out looking for something to score. She climbed up a tree outside his window and shimmied in. His dad heard all the noise and came to investigate, found her and called the cops before talking to her and keeping her distracted until they came. I once had a really crazy nightmare where I ended up waking up and feeling like the main character of my dream was standing over my bed staring at me. My whole body was tingling like it was being electrified, but I really wasn't sure if I should be afraid or not. Sometimes when I would get high and drive, it felt like this guy was in my passenger seat with two girls in my back seat. I never told anyone about it. One day my sister was checking up on me. She used to be into witchcraft and crap. Weird, I know, and long story short, ended up explaining to me exactly what the guy looked like. Not even just general was he dark, with black hair, it was very specific. The kicker was, when she was like, yeah, just don't buy into anything with him. You won't know if he's good or bad, but he's very bad. It's him and he has two girl assistants. I kinda had a nervous breakdown after that TL. Doctor had a crazy nightmare about a guy. Sister explained to me exactly what the guy looked like.